Hi guys, welcome back to my channel and welcome to the video where I rank every episode from season 1 of The X-Files. Now, a couple of things before we start. I have the tendency to ramble a lot, so I'm going to try and go through each episode pretty quickly, just maybe point out a couple of things, because I know that I like to talk a lot, and also this video will be like 2 hours long if I get out all my thoughts about the episodes in each one. If you do want to see my reactions to each episode, I've done a reaction to every episode of Series 1 of X-Files. There's a playlist on my channel, so just go check it out, where you'll probably get my full thoughts on each episode. And also, I changed my mind quite a lot, so I've spent some time getting this list together now, but I know if you ask me again in a month's time, when I've had some more time to reflect, and I come back to it, I'll probably have a completely different list. So it's like, I have some ones that are always going to be at the bottom, some ones that are always going to be at the top, but those middle bunch, and I think of a lot of shows for a lot of people, tend to change quite a lot. So let me know down in the comments below what your ranking is of the season, or like what your top 3 favourite are, what your bottom 3 favourite are, or maybe your whole list if you fancy putting a whole list together. But here's my ranking as Series 1 of The X-Files. Okay, bottom of the list in 24th place, I think would be the same for a lot of people from what I hear, is Space. Now, it's not the worst episode of TV I've ever seen. I just find it a very disappointing episode. There's a lot of just stuff that happens in a control room. The alien face thing looks quite silly, and most of the action takes place through sound, so we hear a lot of creepy stuff happening, but we don't get to see a lot of it, and most of it is just people sat in a control room listening to it happen. It's kind of boring. The ghost looks a bit silly, and overall it's just a very disappointing episode of the show. Okay, in 23rd place, I've gone for The Jersey Devil. This is an episode with a title that sounds like it's going to be some crazy cool kind of monster that lives in the woods, based on like the folklore for the Jersey Devil. It's not that. It's basically just like a cave woman sort of creature. It's not even a creature, it's just a person that lives like a cave person in the forest. Very disappointing episode. Not a lot really exciting happens overall. The monster of the week is kind of lame and dull, and just whilst it could be interesting, and there's some interesting stuff to discuss in terms of when the sheriff shoots the Jersey Devil and it's just shooting a person, overall just a very bland episode of the show. See, from 22 upwards, this is where I don't know what people's opinion is going to be, because everyone's got a lot of different opinions to me. But in 22nd place, I've gone for Lazarus, the episode where Scully's partner dies in a bank job and body gets taken over by one of the bank robbers. I just didn't particularly enjoy this episode. I liked the idea of it. I thought it was kind of a cool concept, but I just felt like I didn't particularly like the characters involved. The guy who was now in his body, I didn't particularly like how he acted. Whilst it was fun to see Scully in danger, which sounds weird to say, because she's in danger a lot, I just didn't take to the characters, didn't care about the action, didn't care about this body swap, and the only good bit was the betrayal of the lady who actually turned the guy in, and she was never with him all along. This one didn't really hit very personal to me. I don't particularly like this episode. In episode 22, Lazarus. Okay, next on the list is episode 22, Born Again. Another episode about revenge, or there's a ghost looking for revenge, this time someone who gets killed by their partners at work, an undercover job, then comes back in the body of a little girl to get revenge. I just didn't care. Like, I enjoyed the episode, watching it, but like reflecting on the themes and the story, like I'm just not bothered. Whilst I got angry at the guys for betraying him because they worked with him, overall I just found like the actual story itself was kind of a bit disappointing, and I just wasn't all that interested in what was happening. And whilst I wanted the guy to get revenge, watching this little girl just stare a lot visually wasn't all the most exciting to see. So had some good things to talk about, had some interesting moments like the guy being thrown out the window at the beginning, but overall I think it's a pretty weak episode. Okay, in 20th place I've gone for Miracle Man. Religious episodes of shows tend to be either hit or miss for me, and this one was a miss. It felt very exploitative, and I guess that was the point. That was it real? Was it not real? Is it an exploit? Is it a scam? I guess I just found it disappointing, the whole explanation. I wanted it to be something more than it was, and to find out this guy was poisoning all these innocent people and using them, bringing them in, and doing it because of someone saved his life and he wasn't happy about it. I didn't love the characters. I didn't find it massively interesting. Had some good things that could have been interesting with a few tweaks. But I just didn't take this episode particularly. It was pretty low on the list for me. I don't know what people's opinions are, because I've not really had many comments on the episode on my reaction, so let me know down below what you think. But Miracle Man for me was one that just missed the mark. Okay, the first mythology episode on this list, in number 19, I've gone for Fallen Angel. I think for this one, it had a lot of promise, and I liked Max as a character. I just felt the threat was odd to me, like this invisible creature that just zipped around and went through lasers. And it might not have helped when someone sent me the link to the behind the scenes where you saw the guy in the green outfit. It just felt like there's a lot of cool alien threats in the show, particularly towards the end of the season, like in the finale in particular. And I know over the seasons of the show, there's some really cool alien stuff. But this episode, it was just an alien that was invisible. A lot of it happened from point of view action, zooming around. Some cool visuals, I guess, in that aspect, but I just wasn't invested in the threat of this episode. As much as I liked Max and felt sorry for what happened to him, I just didn't get on board with the mythology this time round. Okay, in 18th place, I've gone for Young at Heart. The episode about the guy who was an older guy that Mulder stopped his crimes, but for some sort of procedure, he's now young again. Oh yeah, because he got mixed with the DNA of a salamander, so he's got a fish hand, and he's young again. I liked the cat and mouse aspects of this episode, and him leaving clues for Mulder, and is it the guy that he got years ago? Is it somebody different? The cat and mouse part was cool. I just didn't feel like there was much of a threat here, and like this big backstory of Mulder, and I wish they'd have pushed that further. And the weird fish salamander hand, whilst it was weird and funny, didn't really fit with everything else that was going on. I guess it was because salamanders like regenerate and all that stuff, but I just didn't take this one too much. I liked the threat, I liked the cat and mouse, but there's things that they could have done that could have made this episode a bit more exciting, to me personally. Okay, in 17th place, I've gone for Shadows, the episode about the woman who's being protected by the ghost. Again, I found this one quite a generic storyline. It's been done in many shows before, which doesn't make it a bad thing. But X-Files didn't really add much to it that I've not seen in other shows. It's not done stuff a lot differently. She was being protected by this ghost, and that's kind of it. There wasn't a lot to really grip me, whilst there was some interesting scenes with the ghost protecting her, some quite fun visuals. Was I massively excited by the episode? No, but I did enjoy it, and I don't think it's a bad episode. From this point onwards, even maybe a couple before, I actually enjoyed every episode. I do have issues with some of it. Maybe some of them I just didn't find that exciting. It doesn't mean they're bad, it just means I like stuff that other people may not do. So let me know if you really disagree with me, but this episode was okay, but it's not one that I'm like any rush to rewatch anytime soon. Okay, in 16th place, I have gone for episode 4, Conduit. Mainly because, like, I remember bits of the episode, but I don't remember a lot of it. And so I had to go back and reread some of it, so I was like, that's not a good sign for one. But also, like, there's some really interesting stuff here about the fact that it could have been aliens, it could be not aliens, and that's really interesting. But I felt like they could have pushed this thing with a kid further, and I think I would have rated it higher, but because I forgot so much of it, that's usually a sign for me that I didn't care about the episode that much. But when I reread it through, I was like, oh yeah, the kid stuff was quite cool. I liked all the Conduit with the TV and the picture that was made out of the ones and zeros. That was cool. But as a mythology episode of the show, it wasn't the best. I preferred it to Fallen Angel. I hope that makes sense. I feel like I'm rambling at this point, but I did enjoy it. I just think they could have pushed it further. But I did enjoy the fact that they left it open to interpretation at the end, but they could have pushed it a little bit further. Okay, 15th place, very controversially, because I think people love this episode, but I've gone for episode, I think, 13, Beyond the Sea. This is Brad Dourif channeling spirits and dead people and helping them catch a killer. I get why people like it. In some ways, it's really fascinating to watch. I guess where I am in life, just watching a guy just talk a lot, whilst it's fascinating and it's very well acted, there was times where I was like, right, I get it, like, I want something more now. And I know that's just me. I know I'm very much in the minority, because a few bits I've seen online, I know it's a popular episode, and Brad Dourif's brilliant in this episode. I guess it was very slow, and I'm very impatient. So I like episodes with a bit more action, a bit more upbeat, and a bit more stuff going on. And this wasn't that. And this was another episode. I got really angry with Mulder in this one. I'm sure it's this episode. Yeah, it is. Where he told Scully to believe one thing, so she believed one thing, but then he wanted to change, and she started to change, and he was angry at her, and he wants her to believe in all the supernatural stuff, and she started to believe in all these things that he was telling her, but then Mulder was like, you shouldn't believe him. It just kind of felt like elements of it were written brilliantly, like all the stuff with the serial killer, the killer guy channeling spirits was brilliant, but the Mulder stuff was really frustrating. So mixed bag for me. I do enjoy it. I just don't love it as much as other people do. Sorry. Okay, in 14th place, I've gone for the penultimate episode of the show, Roland. This is an interesting episode. I really like the setting of the rocket science lab. I enjoy the character of Roland, but it's just so weird. And the explanation of it being this psychic head that's frozen. I get why they did it, and it's kind of the twin brother stuff's kind of cool. Do I love it? Not particularly, no. Like, I enjoy some of the death scenes. I enjoy Roland and his relationship with Tracy, I think she was called, in the home. But the actual explanation at the end was kind of odd. It's got a trope that I hate in shows, but it's actually quite a good thing, I think. Where, like, people are trying to take credit for other people's work. It's just a personal bugbear of mine. It really annoys me. And that main scientist guy, as much as Roland shouldn't have killed people, I still stick to that. I really wanted him to die above all else. Because he was so... bleh, gross. And I was hoping that the explanation would be something like that they were behind his death somehow when he was back for revenge. That would have been a more satisfying answer for why he came back from being dead. Even though he wasn't dead, his frozen head was in a jar, because that's like an angry spirit's back for like unfinished business. And I guess it was sort of, whether his work was not finished and someone else was taking over it. But him getting Roland to kill people, it was those things that just didn't fully add up to me personally. And I keep saying it to me personally because I know other people love it. But yeah, it was an okay episode, very middle ground. Enjoy it, some really good scenes. The scene the guy got sucked into the turbine was fun, but not my favourite episode of the season. Okay, the last one of the bottom half of the season, I've gone for Shapes. Shapes is the only werewolf episode of the season, and I don't know if they do werewolves ever again in the show. Memory is so bad, I don't know. The werewolf parts were brilliant. Like the scene where the guy turned into the werewolf and Scully was outside the door. Fantastic. The actual prosthetics and practical effects on the guy turning into a werewolf, fantastic. Loved it. I thought it was great. And learning about this other culture was interesting. The rest of it I found kind of weak, because like the werewolf stuff was in it was brilliant, but it wasn't in it very often. There was like a couple of shots of a werewolf and then one big change, which I know was kind of intentional, but I wanted to see more. And just there was some bigotry towards like other beliefs, which I don't enjoy as much as it is prevalent and is important to talk about. Don't get me wrong. I guess I just found all the stuff minus the werewolf stuff was alright. The tribe stuff was interesting. The other culture was interesting. The werewolf stuff was great. But the rest of it was kind of slow. And I wanted to see more werewolves, as much as it was effective because it wasn't in it isn't as much. The werewolf stuff was kind of cool. And they had that weird slow-mo effect on the werewolf at the end, which hurt my eyes. Don't think they needed it. But it was cool that Scully finally saw a werewolf, saw it get shot, saw it change to a human, but still didn't believe. And that's what puts it down the ranking for me as well. Is like Mulder is so great on these supernatural things that it was obvious this guy was the werewolf, and he just didn't do anything about it. He just didn't put it together. Like Scully was like, I just saw this guy naked woke up naked in a field after a werewolf attack. Mulder, come on, you're better than that. Okay, on to the top half of the season for me, and maybe a controversial one. I don't think people love this episode, but I'm not too sure. Episode 7, Ghost in the Machine. I like AI stuff. I enjoy stories about when like computers and stuff kind of start to get their own sort of personality or their own kind of intelligence. As much as it's scary that the world is sort of going in that way, especially like I've got an Amazon Echo and she listens to me and I see stuff, adverts and stuff that I've talked about, and it scares me. But I like that kind of stuff. I thought for the time it's interesting how relevant it is to today's technology as well. And so I enjoyed like the lift scene and Scully's in the vents, but the machine's trying to stop her. I thought there was some really cool stuff, and like Scully was in the vents around like Die Hard, Scully style, which I know sounds really stupid. But I like computer stories, like evil AI and trying to stop that. I know we learn at the end that it's still real, which doesn't surprise me, because I think like in today's modern society, like we can't really get rid of stuff from like the World Wide Web and technology and all that kind of stuff. What I think makes it good for me, as much as I don't think everybody loves this episode, it is that it is very, for an episode that was filmed, 30 years ago near enough, it's still very relevant to today's technology, so I really enjoyed it for things like that. In 11th place, I've gone for the very first episode of the show, the pilot. This was a good pilot. I mean, it's quite funny because a lot of shows that have incredible pilots and then it goes downhill. And there's a lot of shows that have, in my opinion, really bad pilots and then go uphill. And X-Files kind of falls into the middle ground where the pilot was pretty good. Not a great episode of the show, don't get me wrong, but it's a nice introduction to the two characters. A really interesting mythology episode with Billy and the people that had been abducted and the little marks appearing on it. We get Mulder and Scully being pretty close pretty quickly, like when she discovered the marks and went into his room. I think it's a great introduction to the show, to the FBI, the relationship between Mulder and Scully, the fact that Mulder's ridiculed. Cigarette smoking man makes his first appearance and really kicks off that mystery of who is he. He's just in the background smoking. We see him at the end putting that like a chip thing in the warehouse. I think it's a really great introduction to the show. Not the best mythology episode, but it was never going to be, because it's good when they start to build on more of the stuff that we learn over the season. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a really good pilot. Okay, finally on to the top 10 episodes. My favourite 10 episodes of Season 1 of The X-Files. And for number 10, I'm going for Episode 2, Deep Throat. I enjoyed this one a lot more than I expected to, which I know sounds really weird, but I think I came into this with a knowledge of mythology episodes are okay, but I really love Monster of the Week. And Deep Throat was Episode 2, and this is where I really started to get into the mythology for this time round watching it. As for those who have never watched my channel before, I have seen every episode of the show before, a very long time ago, and my memory of mythology episodes is pretty non-existent because minus some big events that happen, I was so young at the time I never took it in really. So Deep Throat was really where I kicked off my love for the mythology. I enjoy the fact that 2 episodes in, Mulder saw some flying saucers and he got taken in by the government and his brain scrambled, which even though Scully doesn't believe in UFOs, the events of the episode were so weird where even she couldn't kind of argue with some of the stuff that happened. Like, why would the government capture him other than the fact that he was on their land? He came out, obviously something had happened to him, he'd had a medical procedure, and it kind of kickstarted Scully's kind of, what's going on here? We saw a UFO. Did we see a UFO? Was it a UFO? Was it an army aircraft? That's what I like about this show with mythology episodes and Monster of the Week, is where it falls on the middle ground of, we can believe it's supernatural and UFOs, we can believe it's explained by science. And some of the best episodes of that for me are ones that fall into that middle ground, like this one is, that it could be new aircraft, it could be a UFO. I like that, but obviously the fact that he got his brain scrambled so early on in the show kind of led me to believe that it's definitely a UFO. But yeah, I really enjoyed episode 2 of season 1, Deep Throat. And obviously we met Deep Throat. In 9th place, another mythology episode. I've gone for episode 17, EBE. This episode I really enjoyed. It's one of my favourite mythology episodes of the season. Obviously not my favourite one, because if you're keeping track, you can see what's still coming up. But I really enjoyed this episode because it put a lot of questions in my mind about what the hell was going on. Are the UFOs real? Are they not real? Can we trust Deep Throat? Can we not trust Deep Throat? And that really interesting scene at the end where Deep Throat basically said, I'm trying to protect you. Don't look around that corner, it's just a dead body, a dead alien, there's no point seeing it, it's dead. I'm here to help, essentially, even though he'd lied already in the episode. And then, went on the corner, saw there was nobody there at all. So that really put a lot of doubt in my mind with Deep Throat coming up to the finale. I just find it really fascinating, we saw the UFO in the sky. Did we? I think we did. I say did we because they keep trying to put everybody off the scent, but I think it's intentional. But yeah, this episode really messed with my mind in a good way, in that I don't know who to trust. Where do I stand? I enjoy that they're being bugged, that Deep Throat's lying to them. They've only got themselves. I think this is the episode that introduces the lone gunman as well. Yeah, really interesting episode of season 1 of The X-Files. That was EBE. Okay, in 8th place, I've gone for the episode Gender Bender. I really don't know what people think of this episode. I don't know if it's classed as a weak one, a strong one. I quite enjoyed it. I enjoyed this alien that can transform their physical appearance from a male appearance to a female appearance. And the fact that they use that to have sex with people, which ultimately kills them. And I think what I liked about it the most is that I enjoy going to different cultures, like I did in Shapes. And I enjoyed this culture. This was like they live off the grid, and they don't like modern technology and stuff. They come into town, their horse and cart, and get the stuff. But obviously it turned out that they're aliens, potentially. That kind of didn't fully add up, but made it an interesting twist. But it was about this guy who was from that culture, had experiences with our culture, modern technology and stuff, and left that to kind of experience the world. And he had the ability to change genders and have sex with people, and that's what you wanted to experience, the nightclubs and the pubs and sex and all that kind of stuff. And I liked that. But obviously then he killed people, which wasn't great. But then it had the weird, I just assumed it was going to be this culture, these people that have found the ability to, that when they died, they changed gender, but this guy had the ability to do it at will. But then right at the end there was a twist of boom, they can reappear out of nowhere and they're aliens. Or it appeared they're aliens because of a crop circle and they just disappeared. So were the aliens all along? Why were they living in the middle of nowhere? We don't really know. There's a lot unexplained. But I just had a good time this episode trying to figure out what was going on. And I enjoyed the whole, I like it when someone from one culture wants to experience our life. I think that's a really interesting thing to look at. Yeah, I just really enjoyed Gender Bender. In 7th place, an episode I know a lot of people have a soft spot for, episode 12, Fire. I really enjoyed this episode. It has a really weird tone to it, like a fun tone, because Mark Sheppard, who plays Cecil Lively, who can create fire with his hands, is a fun actor, and he's really great in this role. I guess it had this weird, like, here's this agent from Britain who's come to help them, ask them for the help with this investigation, and Mulder's like loves it, Scully's jealous, and it had that weird tone to it. But a lot of the episode focused around Cecil's character, which was a nice dynamic where we follow the bad guy. Well, he was a bad guy, I don't know why I'm doing air quotes. We followed the bad guy and watched him trying to go about his business and kill various people. He's a really fun actor, fun character, and I can see how people really like this episode. Someone said it was a guilty pleasure. I don't think it should be seen as a guilty pleasure. I think it's a fun episode, and it was interesting watching Mulder's dynamic with that lady who I didn't like, not just because she was getting in the way of Scully, but Scully was great in this episode because she was like rolling her eyes a lot as well. When Mulder was flirting with that woman and she was like awful, and Scully was just not impressed. Really great villain. Cecil was really memorable. I was enjoying watching him just when he could just set his hands on fire. That was really fun visuals in this episode. Yeah, it was really good. In sixth place, I come for the second part of the only two-part I think of the season, Tombs. I definitely think this is a weaker episode to the first part, but overall, I just love Eugene Victor Tombs. I won't say too much because spoiler alert, squeeze is still to come, but I definitely think this is a weaker part of the two. I think he's definitely more interesting in the first half, but I enjoy Eugene Victor Tombs whenever he's on screen. I think he's a fascinating villain. Visually, he's great because he's got such a black face, but his eyes change when you can see what kind of mood he's in when his eyes change. Basically, they changed yellow when he's hunting. And it was interesting watching him not trying to be normal again, because his intention was never to just to be normal. His intention was to act under the radar, get out of where he is, go back to life as normal, so that he can go and kill his last person before he goes and hibernates, which he does. And obviously Mulder ends up stopping him. And I think it's great. I love watching Eugene Victor Tombs hunt. I think he's creepy. Watching him stretch is creepy. And just by nature of how he acts, he's a scary villain. One of my favourite villains of the season. But I definitely found him scary in the first half, which is why it's higher than this. But still, I found it a really enjoyable episode. And he met a really gross, sticky end right at the end of the episode. Okay, top 5 now, guys. Let me know down below how much you disagree with me up to this point. But my top 5 episodes, starting at number 5, are the season finale, The Erlenmeyer Flask. I had a really great time with this episode. I think it had a lot of really interesting stuff to go on. Primarily because this is the first time that Scully fully puts belief into the fact that something supernatural is happening, because she sees it with her own eyes, but from a scientific point of view. So supernatural doesn't have to be unexplainable, but that supernatural is more than what we know from Earth. So there's extra DNA blocks, which is not natural. This is not how Earth is built, how we're built, how everything we know in nature is built. It's supernatural. And this is the first time that, like I say, Scully's belief system was not just tested, but changed completely. She fully believed that something extra was going on. On top of that, we had the really interesting story arc of the man who was shot, and then green blood. He survived underwater. What's all that about? And we really dived into this human-alien hybrid and the purity control fetus baby thing, and why were they mixing alien and human DNA. Really interesting stuff, and it definitely felt like a finale. They were ramping up the tension and ramping up the twists, like Deep Throat getting shot and killed, X-Files being shut down. Really good finale, and like I say, it's good because the action scenes at the beginning, really good alien stuff. Fascinating to watch this guy hunting. The bodies in the tank were a really creepy image, but also, like I say, for me, one of the best parts of the episode was Scully's journey, and I'm interested to see when we hopefully get around to watching Series 2 on the channel, where that goes in Series 2, because she's now going to be more open to the suggestion that things are supernatural. Whereas up to this point, she's always tried to find a logical explanation. This is the first time she went, I'm sorry, I was wrong. This isn't explainable. You know, what's going on here. Yeah, really strong finale for me. My Flask, season finale of season 1. In 4th place, going for episode 20, Darkness Falls. I think a lot of why I love this episode is definitely nostalgia. I told the story briefly in the reaction, but I'll tell it briefly again now in case you're just watching this video. But I have a memory of watching this when I was very, 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 very young. Maybe when it was first aired on TV. No, I must have been about 6 or 7 actually. So about 96, 97 time. And my family were watching it downstairs, and I got so scared when I went to bed. I had one of those beds where you climb up to it, and there was like a desk underneath. I remember peering over the edge of the side of the bed to look under the light of the doorway to see if green bugs were going to come for me. So it really scared me from being a kid, and I have such a strong image of the people in the webbing and the green bugs floating down and Scully having the green bugs in her arm, that it's just struck a chord with me ever since I was a kid. I've always loved it, and it's always scared me. And I enjoyed it again this time round. I enjoy Cabin in the Woods stories. I enjoy stories that take place in forests. Some of my favourite films, like Friday the 13th, this gave me vibes of that with the power going out. And there was a lot of tropes here that I enjoyed, being isolated, having to survive through the night with not much at your disposal, and just the creepy image of the green bugs, and getting to see Mulder and Scully, like, in the cocoon, essentially, or part cocoon. Obviously, they weren't there long enough to die, luckily. I just really enjoyed this episode. I think it's really creepy, really interesting villain that they're bugs that were prehistoric, but got trapped into a tree. But because people were like cutting down trees and deforestation, they got released again. Yeah, I really found that fascinating, and I really enjoyed Darkness Falls. It's really a nostalgic episode for me. Love it, love it, love it. Okay, on to the top 3, and in third place, episode 11, Eve. I love this episode. I just think it's fun. I enjoy twins and evil twins and good twins. And yes, in this episode, they were all just evil. And they weren't even just twins, they were like clones, essentially. But I think what I like about this episode is it's a small part of a bigger thing. So we got to follow the story, really, of these two Eves that were killing their parents and then trying to trick Mulder and Scully. And it was like, you're evil, just look at them, they're evil. They poison your drink and all that stuff. But then we found out there's obviously lots of other Eves. There's a few in this prison cells. One of them came at the end to maybe release them. And so this could have many sequels, but I don't think there ever is. Let me know down below if the sequel's in like comic book form or any other continuation that's been done in the X-Files kind of verse, because I'd be interested to check it out, because I think there's so much potential here for like stories where there's multiple Eves. And I really enjoy the actress that plays the older Eves. I've seen her in Desperate Housewives and other things. I think she's brilliant at playing a crazy person. And I enjoy the girls that were younger Eves, so I think it could be interesting to see like a follow-up to this. I think it's a brilliant. I enjoy them being evil kids and watching them trying to pass off as innocent to Mulder and Scully. Like, come on, Mulder, Scully, like, see what's going on. Come on, guys, come on. But yeah, I just think this is a really fascinating episode. I really enjoyed it. Okay, there's only 2 episodes left. If you're keeping track, you know where they are. In second place, the episode that I think most people have in first place, so I apologise if you don't agree. I'm going for episode 8, Ice. I think this is a brilliant episode. There's nothing about this episode that I don't enjoy. I think it's a brilliant isolated story, which I've always said, isolation stories are some of my favourite ones. I like watching characters who are trapped in an isolated place, having to survive with what's at their disposal. Everything they need to survive is there, potentially. Or everything they need to try and survive is there. And it's just about watching them survive. And I also enjoy this because it's very much based on like The Thing. Who can you trust? Who's evil? Who's going to turn against you? Because there's this parasite that's gone into this person. Are they evil? Is it you? Is it you? Is it Scully? Is it Mulder? That paranoia is really fascinating to watch, and not knowing who's essentially not the bad guy, but being, you know, taken over by the parasite as the bad guy. And I think it's brilliant just watching them turn against each other, trying to find out ways that they can rule each other out, but then going crazy because that, not just the isolation, but not knowing who to trust was slowly messes with your mind, and they're turning against people just for little things, whereas there's people that are acting really shifty that they're not turning against, and how they're not thinking straight. Really, really strong episode of the show. Yeah, I can see why people love this episode. It's so fun to watch. I'm really excited to do a rewatch of it at some point. And it's probably good, interesting rewatching it, knowing who gets possessed and who the quote-unquote bad guys are, because I can then watch it seeing for clues this time, rather than trying to figure out myself without knowing who it is. Yeah, Ice is one of the best episodes of Season 1, 100%. So by process of elimination, you probably realise what my favourite episode of the Season 1 of X-Files is, and that's Episode 3, Squeeze. I love this episode. Again, one of the few episodes that I have such a really vivid memory of from when I first watched it. I love Eugene Victor Toombs. I think he's creepy. I think he's scary. I think this is an almost perfect episode of the show. I think any scene that he's in terrifies me. That visual of him in the sewer, when you just barely see his eyes, I think is scary as hell. That's like one of my fears of looking out into darkness and just seeing a glimpse of something. Scares the crap out of me. And obviously just it reminds me of Pennywise as well. But that, and just him stretching into places and seeing his body transform like that, really disturbs me and just creeps me out a lot. He's so scary in this episode. Like the way he moves, the way he growls, the way he stares, the way he barely speaks. I just think he's perfect. That sounds like a fancy name, I really don't. Perfect as a villain. And I remember I used to being really scared as a kid when he was in Scully's vent and she was going to get attacked. Oh, no, that was so tense. And rewatching it, kind of, do you know when you get scared of something as a kid, and when you watch it as an adult, you know it's not that scary, but because you felt that fear as a kid, there's elements of it that always stick with you. That 100% is an episode for me. Just watching him move, and also like when he goes after Scully and like dives out that thing, I think it's such a good effect. Primal fears, people breaking into my house, just stretching the abnormal behaviour, the fact that he's like 100 years old, whatever. I just absolutely adore this episode. It's my favourite episode of Series 1. That's episode 3, Squeeze. So guys, that's my ranking of every episode of Season 1 of The X-Files. Let me know down below how much you agree or disagree with my opinion. I welcome all opinions, so please let me know down below what you agree with me on, and what episodes your favourites are, what you disagree with me on, ones that you would have a lot higher than I did. I imagine things like Beyond the Sea will be high for a lot of people, and so maybe some of the mythology episodes, what you'd have lower. I think I like some episodes, like maybe The Squeeze isn't everyone's favourite, maybe Eve's not everyone's favourite, I don't know. Let me know down below what you think of the ranking of Series 1 episodes, and again, if you're interested in watching my reaction to every episode, there's a playlist on my channel, so go check that out. Let me know what you think down below, and subscribe if you're interested. Thanks for watching. As I say, let me know down in the comments below what your ranking is and what you think, and I'll hopefully see you all soon for the next episode of The X-Files. Bye guys, and take care.